Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How do time slips actually work? Who are the strange, out-of-place first responders people report in flap areas? And one we didn't get to last week, is Bigfoot naughty or nice?
Welcome to the 874th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you live from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live and TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those far-flung questions came from my co-host, partner in paranormal adventures, and dad, Paul. And today we bring you an open line show and a guest co-host along with us. Surprise, surprise. And if you'd like to join us on air, you can call us at 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com.
Well, first of all, we'd like to wish all our Jewish friends a happy Hanukkah. We're in the middle of Hanukkah now, which we've done several shows on the winter holidays, and they're, if you would care to say, paranormal roots. And Hanukkah is one of those, but that's we've discussed that many times in the past. But anyway, for the second week in a row, our scheduled guest had to reschedule because of illness. So we're doing another impromptu open line show, and I'm distinctly relieved to have Ben back today after a 2-week hiatus, and our favorite guest co-host, Shane Sirois. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Well, thanks for doing the show with me, Dad.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
I'm glad to be here, and I hope everyone's doing well.
Very good. So let us begin. Let's start with we have a lot of questions come in over Facebook, so we'll start with that.
I am excited to dive into the alignment of Bigfoot here. So this is from Carrie in North Smithfield, Rhode Island, writing to us. Why are some people scared of Bigfoot and other people are not? I have read many stories about this, and some people who see Bigfoot say he is aggressive, and others say he just stands there or runs away. It's actually a very astute observation.
Okay, it is actually. Well, let's see. Shane, in May of 2016, you had a Bigfoot experience, and we were down in the Pennsylvania Triangle. It was our first expedition down there. It's a new case for us. We've only been working on it for 4 years. How did you feel? Were you frightened? Was Bigfoot naughty or nice? Or what? Tell us about that experience.
Well, first I'd like to say, I think just like with any human or just like any other creature, you're going to have some that are more aggressive and some that aren't, more timid. So I think you might get a little bit of both, whole assortment with these. But what my experience that particular time, because I did have a run-in with something else that was a little bit more aggressive than the one I told you I couldn't actually see, but it jumped down from something and landed behind me. But the one that took off was the one that I believe was going after deer, because it had flushed the deer, and I saw the deer running, and I saw this thing take off the other way when it heard my vehicle coming at it. But it was moving around very strangely, and then I put it in drive and I gunned it, and as soon as I did that, it just took off, arms swinging really high, and it was gone. Like, I tried to cut it off up the path, and it was long gone. And then, but as I passed the area where I originally saw it, I saw these 3 whitetails just running, over by the woods, into the woods, and then I backed back up, and that's when I walk up to the sign. And the sign was 2 foot taller than I am, so put that thing about 8 foot tall, because that's how tall it was. It was right to the top of that sign. But definitely that one took off from me. So the other one was in the same location. Sounded like it. I don't know what it jumped, but it. I didn't hear any footsteps. All of a sudden, just thud behind me, and I could hear real chested, like guttural breathing, and I just couldn't see anything there. There was nothing there. I could see everything else, but there was something there. I just couldn't see it.
Yeah, that's happened to a number of people we've talked to down there. Now, Ben, your experience right here in our listening area in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, I remember that day. You were working at St. Antoine's assisted living and nursing facility on the top of the hill we live on. And you're coming down through the woods. Yeah.
Well, it was convenient, right? I didn't need to. I couldn't drive at the time, so.
Well, your mom and I said we're going to. You before you become some big radio star, you're going to have a real job. Not that this isn't a real, but I mean, you know what I mean.
No, I figured, yeah. Well, I mean, I made a lot of really good friendships there, and it was a valuable experience for what it was.
Including the Woonsocket Wildman, apparently.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know. There's the problem with it. It's like, I know what I saw. It's entirely possible because there was actually a pretty high like homeless population that lived like in that stretch of woods for a time. But at the same time, it was like I saw something big and hairy peek over a rock at me, and it was just I don't know why, but it just something in it just a big like just like a electrical shock of like fear just jolted through me, and I just ran. I don't know if it was like a fight or flight reflex that just kind of like popped up, or it's kind of weird, right? Now that the more I'm kind of thinking about it, it had just rained. There are a lot of I can't remember. There actually is a substation or something up there, right? No, there's a water tower that's right at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
Which is
the other end, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the other end.
Avenue.
I don't know. There was always kind of weird stuff that kind of happened in there, and there was always sort of this unwritten rule that everyone kind of followed in the neighborhood, which is you don't go in the woods after dark. Which is like some people would find it relaxing. It's like for whatever reason you kind of just got this weird feeling being in there. I don't know. It was kind of a strange situation to find yourself in, right? You're walking home from work. And, I kind of turned a corner on this path and I glanced over and see something peeking, this, big hairy thing peeking over a boulder. And, I just ran. That was all I could do, right? I mean, I think with the sort of question that, Carrie's asking is that, why do we respond in certain ways to certain phenomena? And why is it different some other times, right? And I would argue it could be a couple of different things. I think first it could be us. And how we view the situation, right, with our dumb pea brains, and we don't really know what's going on, right? So, right, exactly. We know shiny, spooky thing. Like, we only know so much, and if we experience something we don't understand, we can react in a couple of different ways, right? I mean, the reason that humor. I think H.P. Lovecraft once said there's a very thin line between humor and horror. It's because, we laugh at things we don't understand.
Said that.
Did you say that? Oh, I thought it was H.P. Lovecraft.
Well, Lovecraft said a lot of great stuff in his essay about the horror literature, but I believe that was my original. Well, I haven't had a lot of original thoughts, but that was one of them.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong, right? The reason that we find comedy funny is... there's two reasons. One, it's relatable, or two, it's you can't understand it, so we just start laughing about it because we just don't get it and it doesn't make sense. And we try to make sense of it. That's why absurdism is so popular now, right? It's a reflection of our culture and how just absurd everything is, right? Or even the philosophical standpoint of absurdism. I think that was Immanuel Kant. I don't know. Whoever it is. Anyway, I digress. So, we how we understand things is how we react to them, right? So, like, the little girl in Pennsylvania who, saw Bigfoot there, was absolutely terrified of it, but yet, we have Shane with us who's, he's just not afraid of anything, and he just is like, I gotta chase this thing. I gotta find out more about it.
Yeah.
Because that, it's how we approach the situation, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct, yeah. Well, maybe 100 yards from that little girl was terrified. I had a very positive Bigfoot encounter. And so that, again, in Pennsylvania. But I've talked about that many times on the show.
Right.
So, yeah, I think maybe, as you're right, Ben, the people you bring to it, what you get out of it, what you bring to it. So, and I think Shane's point is very good too. That you've got every dog, cat, squirrel, person, Bigfoot probably has their own personality, and that's essentially I think the essence of it. Okay, now funny, you brought up Lovecraft because our next question is from dear old Peter in Bogota, our very faithful listener and good questioner who writes almost every week. So do you have that in front of you, or do you have
I do.
The updated? Okay.
I'm prepared.
Okay.
So Peter wrote a couple of questions to us, actually, well, 3 questions. And we'll start off with the first one, which is probably most related to Lovecraft, which is, Paul, you have mentioned your trip to Haiti a number of times, but can you please share the full story of what happened?
Oh, that's actually not the question. You might not have gotten the updated version. Yeah, did I answer that last week?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, that's right. You weren't on the show last week. I did answer it last week. Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the updated one.
I'll just. These are updated questions here. Okay, this is also from Peter. From time to time, you have mentioned being related to one of the greatest writers of horror literature that ever lived, or whoever lived, H.P. Lovecraft. Do you have any interesting information to share about him, and do you have any reason to believe that his fantastic horror stories were in any way inspired by actual paranormal phenomena? Okay, just briefly, we are related to him distantly. I guess we're like 5th cousins, or Ben would be maybe 6th cousin, which is not too distant, but not too close either. Our good friends Keith and Carl Johnson, who are well known in the paranormal realm, are like second cousins to Lovecraft. But I've had the honor of representing the extended family, as it were, at 1 or 2 events, and because the Johnsons couldn't get to. So we are relatives. Lovecraft lived from 1890 to 1937. Was mostly in Providence, Rhode Island, near where we broadcast from, the capital of our state. And he was well known for his horror stories. That he was a pioneer of science fiction literature, writing a lot of very unusual stories about old. I guess the elder ones, a previous race that had ruled Earth and was trying to come back. Most of it pretty original stuff. It is often thought that he really was a believer in the paranormal and was basing stuff on things that he'd researched. He did research all the ancient literature he could get his hands on, and he grew up with a huge private library that his grandfather owned. But he himself was a non-believer. He was an atheist through and through, and was not the sort of person who would believe in the paranormal, certainly a materialist. But he got a great deal of joy out of writing about it, and that's it. And another personal connection would be one time your grandmother and I, Ben, were driving through Providence, and we were pointing out some of the Lovecraftian sites. He's a well-known fellow in Providence, and there's a memorial to him. And the sites, many sites that he wrote about in his stories, exist in Providence, and certainly in New England, most of them. And one of them, we were driving by the Shunned House. That's one of his stories, probably the closest he ever came to writing a vampire story. And it's funny because in his story he said, and there was supposedly a crazy person who had lived in the house. A lot of people who went there, who lived there, supposedly had mental issues later on. But a woman supposedly in the 1700s was screaming in French out of one of the upstairs windows. And to this day, the owners in a jocular manner have all their beware of dog signs in French. So hopefully, so the dog has a good day if you don't understand French, I guess. But in any case, we were driving by there, and I said, "Oh, that's Lovecraft wrote a story about that." And he said, "Oh, he was a pill," which is her 19th century way of saying that he was a pain in the neck. Now, I've never heard Lovecraft described that way generally, but apparently, she had never told me this. Apparently, my father and Lovecraft corresponded. I don't know if they knew they were related, but my father was a big fan. That's where I get a lot of my interest in the paranormal early on, and pass it on to you, Ben, and everybody else I come in contact with. So, but naturally, she threw away all the letters from Lovecraft are worth a lot today. And my father also had a complete set of Weird Tales magazine, which was one of the magazines Lovecraft wrote for, and she threw it all away.
That sounds about right.
If you could divorce your mother, I would have done so. Absolutely. So anyway, so that's the connection. But I guess to answer Peter's main one here, I don't think Lovecraft based anything in his stories on anything he actually believed, but he did base them on a lot of legends, things of that kind, and things that he built upon. So I think that's probably. But and as a second question here, I guess you don't have this either, Ben. Time slip stories. Okay, on a past show, you related the story of land surveyors encountering a house from a different time. Any more such accounts? That's the Vermont disappearing house case from the 1970s, and that's written in several of my books. But we have a whole chapter, actually, in Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, our book from, wait a minute, what am I?
It's also right behind your head.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, there are three of them here. Okay, one of the ones in there was probably the most striking was the disappearing ghost town in Utah. And in 1996, I was addressing a group in Providence, and an elderly woman came up and mentioned that she and her husband had been in Utah, and they were great enthusiasts for ghost towns. They've been driving through looking for ghost towns, things of this kind. And she said that they had encountered one that they wanted to go and see, maybe get some artifacts or whatever that might have been lying around on the ground. That happens there. And they were told in their hotel by the manager that the ghost town didn't really exist anymore. So they said, well, we'll go see if we can see what we can see. So they drove in there, and there was a whole town, and there was a welcome sign that didn't say welcome. It said Vilcom. It was a different language. And long story short, all the cars looked the same. There were ordinary-looking people, but everybody spoke a strange language, which later on turned out to be Dutch. And they figured, well, maybe there are some kind of Mennonites or somebody, because Mennonites don't speak Dutch, but they speak, Germanic language. And they couldn't figure out what was happening. And they went into a restaurant. Even the menu was in Dutch, and then the guy did not recognize American money, but he took their coins at the end, and it was really, really creepy. And they kind of got out of it. People were gathered around their car, which was a lot brighter in color than the ones in that area. So they left, and they didn't want to go back, but there were never any reports of this again. And these were retired professional people, had been in banking, and they knew. She just did not come across to me. She even had notes that she'd taken during this. Another example, there are many, many examples in my files. Chagford, the village of Chagford in Devon, England. I was there in 1989, and I heard the story of the disappearing cottages. And for several occasions in the 19th century, people would see these cottages spring up. And one person even went inside, met the person who was there, who didn't say a word, but was very friendly, gave her tea, and a very strange bird in a cage. So, what one thinks back to our ideas about the multiverse, and there being parallel worlds in which there are maybe different times, different kinds of different species, all kinds of different outcomes, all outcomes if you figure it all up. So yes, Peter, a good question, and that's as a matter of fact, somebody else asked about this case too. In our group of questions today. So, whether they're time slips, space slips, both, neither, they seem to happen relatively frequently. And Shane and Ben, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, remember different type of time slip. I mean, I've been out in the woods and I've encountered, houses and never been able to find that house again, even though I know I'm in the right area, Yep. Another intriguing thing is staircases. People running into staircases in the middle of the woods. I mean, they're just a grand staircase for no reason. And, there's a whole bunch of stories about that, but I've encountered those and never been able to find them again. But, then you get the time slips that happen within people's homes where it's not actually a parasite, but you have things happening like probably 20 years ago, Paul, you invited me on to one of your cases. I think it was in Rhode Island. Maybe not, but you'll remember. I think it was on a lake.
That was in western Rhode Island by the Connecticut line, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Washington Lake, yeah.
So in the family, if I remember correct, over the couple years that they lived there, they've encountered, they said, like 25 different apparitions, some more than once, but some of them only once, and they would see them, over this period of time, and none of them would interact with them. None of them, the apparitions or whatever you want to call them, acknowledged the family, except for like the girl would interact quite a bit with them, the one that used to play underneath the table. But the rest, I remember the guy recalling walking down a hallway and passing a bedroom door, and there's a man standing right in the doorway, and it startled him. But this man standing in the doorway never saw him; like it looked right through him. So that's a different type of time slip.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's classic multiverse. Ben?
It's interesting. I don't think I've ever run into them personally. I've heard a lot of stories about them, and I don't doubt that they exist. Mostly because, I think the term is problematic, but other than that, it's like, I think it kind of is. We live in New England, right? And it's supposedly the most haunted part of the country. And it's only because it's the oldest part of the country. So we have a lot older buildings, and therefore a lot more time to kind of say, oh, well, this is haunted, X, Y, and Z lived here or committed suicide here, or somebody jumped off of the mill, and they were sick of working for whoever, the guy happened to be at the time. Yeah, Samuel Slater. Duh, I should know this. And, I think we just happen to be in a convenient part of the country, and it just kind of makes the most sense to say, oh, well, it's just time, which is, I think, a cop-out for actually looking at the events themselves. And, I've never personally experienced it. Like I said, heard a lot of stories. I have heard about those staircases in the woods, though. I thought that was just kind of like an internet thing, but apparently it's a real thing.
Well, actually, I have news for you, Ben. You did experience it. You might not remember. This is when we first, and this again would be of interest to our local audience. Woonsocket Hill, which we live. It's the Fairmount neighborhood and Upper Fairmount and over into North Smithfield and then part of it in Blackstone, Massachusetts. It's a big hill, and a lot of weird things happen on this hill, as we've just discussed. One of them was just after we moved here in 1996, and you, Ben, and your two cousins and the neighborhood dog were walking and exploring the woods. There's about 30 acres of open space land there, and we came upon a huge, it had to be at least an acre or two, a huge field full of yellow flowers. You must remember that.
I actually kind of vaguely remember that, yes.
And there was a path down the middle of it, and it was just so beautiful. And we enjoyed a walk through it, but it's only about 30 acres. I have never been able to find that field again over all these years. Never found it again. And it would be more or less kind of right above our house almost. Mm. The Spooner property is is the old name of some of that land. So I think that's an example of possibly a multiversal experience of that kind. So on that note of pretty yellow flowers, do you have Ann's question from Michigan?
I do, which is, okay. Have you ever seen aliens?
That's the second time we've gotten that very question in the past month, and it's a good question. Shane, why don't you take that one to start?
Yeah, I have since I was a little boy. The first encounter was when I was 3. We actually lived in a home that was haunted, quotations, where we would see a man. He was an angry man, and my mother saw him. I saw him. But then what I was seeing in the corner of the room started to change into different things. And then one night, I was looking out into the room on my side. I was like 3 or 4 years old. And just as I start to fall asleep, I feel a hand on my face, and I open my eyes, and now I'm looking at your typical gray-looking alien. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but in retrospect, that's what I saw. And then when we moved to San Antonio, Texas, when I was 7, and that's when I started to see them in my room a lot, like 2 on either side of my bed usually, majority of the time there was a taller one, maybe 6-7 foot tall, towards the back of the room, and the little ones would look at him or it for direction. Then their hands would go up towards my head, and I don't remember after that. Sometimes I would know they were outside my window. I'd go to the window. I don't remember what happens after that. All I remember is having this strong urge to go out there with them. And then I don't remember what happens. I would wake up in the morning. My mother would tell me, "Do you know you tried to walk out the door last night?" She stopped me, or she would find me sleeping in different parts of the house in the middle of the night. Or in the morning she'd find me in weird places. And so now as an adult, I have encounters in the middle of the night that I know are related. I just no longer see them. I think a lot of that is because I sleep in the dark. I don't have a nightlight, and like when you're a kid or something. But I do have encounters. I haven't since the last time I had the thought to draw my 9mm, because I had hit with paralysis and I couldn't move. But I had the thought, get your 9mm, grab your gun. And as soon as I thought that, we hear thud, thud, thud. The paralysis goes away just like a snap of a finger. And my wife jumps out of bed. What was that? And my 9mm had got taken out of my boot. Boot wasn't disturbed and was thrown clear across the room. And we have a really large master bedroom, so it wasn't like 5 feet. I'm talking 15, 20 feet away. And wow. It had to have been. And so I think that was the last encounter I had with them.
Well, I don't know what you need firearms for. You have Karen to protect you.
And Hank the German Shepherd. Yep.
Yeah, Hank the German Shepherd. Well, I think, too, Ben, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think technically, just in the line of work, you have to define what an alien is. And, I think we've all kind of experienced that at some point in time because, alien essentially just means other. Going from the ancient Greek, just something completely out of the realm of possibility or utterly different from us. And I'd say yes, through our work, dealing with various parasites and other entities. Yeah, we kind of deal with it on a weekly basis. Although a thought occurred to me, if none of us were involved in this field. Do you think we'd ever experience anything, right? I mean, Shane, you've had experiences since you were a kid. If you just suddenly stopped doing this, you think you'd still experience stuff?
Yeah, I do.
Interesting question.
This is why I'm into it, is because I was experiencing it first, and then I got interested into it, and having like a thirsty mechanical aptitude, you had to figure out what's going on, what is this, and it was first living in that haunted home where we were experiencing paranormal activity, but then having that alien encounter, that was my next experience for a while, the duration, and then at 10 having a near-death experience where there was a lot of weird things happening around me while I was sick, and wanting to know how does this work? I need to understand every layer and all the components and how and so that's what I've been doing my whole life, and that's why is because I first experienced it. But I think I think most of the time, not the ones that are being attacked by a parasite, but once you've experienced the paranormal, you're kind of always connected. You're tuned almost to it. So you can learn how to shut that off, and that's what I do to people. I help people do that. But unless you go through that process and really change your internal dialogue, you're forever connected. You will always experience things.
Okay. Well, we're going to I'll just do a brief station ID here. It's Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno and our special guest co-host Shane Sirois today, Open Line Show on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. And I think we'll leave it at that because we have a caller. We don't want to keep waiting. And I believe it is Phil from Connecticut, one of our show reporters. Phil, welcome. You're on WOON and Behind the Paranormal.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing today? Good afternoon.
Oh, pretty fair. Yeah, we are always happy to hear from our show reporters. Now, Phil is over in the Litchfield, Goshen area in Connecticut, which is the heart of our Triangle, one of Ben's first cases. So, Phil, what's you had a question you wanted to ask, I believe, but we have it in writing.
Yeah, a comment about the Litchfield Triangle and a question for perhaps for Shane. And now you had mentioned the Vermont situation with the surveyors, and they had seen, according to your book and your work, a man with an axe walking on his property, and that the house looked very much as if it was unpainted and looked as if it was from the 1800s. And this uncontrollable urge comes over one to kind of skedaddle out of the area sometimes when you're forced with that situation. My question is, what would happen if those surveyors had kind of knocked on the door and tried to interact with these people that they slipped into time with? What do you think might have happened then?
That's an awfully good question. Well, did you want to ask Shane that?
Sure, because that kind of correlates with what he was talking about with missing people. I know Shane had done work with the UFO virtual show that was on from Danbury, and he did a whole segment on missing people. And I'm wondering if sometimes Enter These Time Slips also correlates with missing people. So it was like second part of that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I think a strong consideration, a very strong consideration with the missing people. A lot of people want to lean towards, Bigfoot. Bigfoot's taking them, and sometimes it does seem like that. You can, lean in that direction, but sometimes people just vanish. Like their footprints just stop. There's no big footprints that come up to them and take them. They just stop in the snow or stop in the sand, and like they just. So, did they pass through some kind of portal? The same type of mechanics that allow these time slips to cross over, or did it now the reverse? Instead of something coming in, somebody went out of this existence here. Is that what happened? I mean, it really looks that way sometimes. So I think that's a really good question. I just that's something that I really think of. I mean, I would lean. For the majority of the cases that I've studied, I would lean more in that direction than I would Bigfoot. Be it like a portal, and then also I can't rule out alien either.
Well, it's all intertwined somehow, and it seems that the one common factor in all of these is they're not planned. It just happens. I mean, you can't say, I'm going to at 4 o'clock this afternoon have a paranormal experience up at the Triangle. It doesn't work that way. It just kind of happens, often when you least expect it.
That's the trouble with doing TV shows on this subject,
It's fast and you don't expect it.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting...
I mean, you can think about this, but all it seems to tie into the multiverse where all possibilities exist. At the Litchfield Triangle, and that's well documented in your books, Paul, and also in William Hall's books, and you've had Donna on. I was up there recently, and there was an incredible stillness. If you go, I don't want to give the exact name of the road, but as you go up into Goshen and into the very rural area, all of a sudden you come around where that underground base is supposedly. And I was up there, and there was just a point where there was no wind, no birds, a very pale color descends upon the place, a certain brownness hanging in the air, a sense of timelessness, like everything is so still, and then it feels electrified. It feels like you can feel coursing through your body. You can feel your hair standing on end. And it's very seemingly brief, but then all of a sudden you say, well, I've been here for half an hour. How'd that happen? And then I get that uncontrollable urge to leave. Which it baffles me as I sit here, but it's something that I think Shane or somebody mentioned or Ben earlier this afternoon, just that sometimes you're involved in situations and you just get the urge to leave, like it's a flight or fight situation.
I was going to actually
say... That's still, I think, an active area, and they all seem to be triangles, too, if you think about it. The Pennsylvania Triangle, the Litchfield Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, the ranch, they all seem to fall upon that symbol. So that's interesting, too. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, I was going to say, because he said something that I've mentioned on the show before, talking about these subjects. And so when we're in these areas that we call, the paranormal flap areas, which are also, some of these flap areas are that we've heard about and that we're in, are also areas where people are going missing strangely with no, rational explanation. But while we're in these paranormal flap areas, prior to something happening, it's just like he said, everything goes still, and my body becomes like electrified. I've said it buzzes like zzz, and I feels like my body's just buzzing. And sometimes I think it's a vehicle I'm in. I'm like, and I realize it happens to me every time right before something happens. So I'm glad that he said that, because I've mentioned that on the show many times, and it happens within these flap areas. It happened in Connecticut to me. It happened in Pennsylvania flap area case prior to me having experience with something.
Well, yeah, that's true. And Phil, I know, and I have talked about this previously, but there have been a lot of strange electronic phenomena going on around that vicinity, and things on utility poles that, now my military experience being, 40-odd years old, nevertheless couldn't recognize, and we've taken photos and shown them to people who were technicians for utility companies. They didn't recognize them either. A lot of strange things going on. Also, there were being developed when I was in the military, things like sensors and monitoring devices that looked like knots of trees. And, you'd stick it out of the tree. You wouldn't know the difference between that and the tree. Things like that, like 007 kind of stuff. And I swear there are things like that I've seen around that area. But again, we are not able to get too close to it generally, although there have been exceptions to that, and we're still kind of keeping an eye. And we have been looking for any disappearances in that area, and we haven't found any that weren't explainable. Phil, as a show reporter, you can consider that homework if you would be so kind. Keep an eye out.
I'll look into about. I've no interest in disappearing. I still have a lot of work to do in this plane of existence.
I really hope you don't.
But there's it's a very, very strange place, and there's also a lot of people in the area have had their electric bills go skyrocketing. Now, there might be a reason for that. The local energy company, Eversource, was spiking its prices during COVID, which caused all this stir. But there might be other reasons, too. Now, could you just talk briefly to the phenomenon? You've talked about this before, where you have energy around where you're living, and then the electric bill skyrockets.
Yeah, well, these things are all connected. I particularly researched that in reference to parasites, what folklore calls demons. If they're in a vicinity, you see a lot of activity within 200 to 1,000 feet around high-tension wires, which are, when I was a reporter, I actually discovered the hard way how leaky, as it were, some of these high-tension wires can be. Maybe the insulation is better today, but I actually, when I was working for a smaller daily paper in Rhode Island, I held a fluorescent bulb, and I stood under the wires, and the bulb lit up. So not a good place to live or to put a playground. However, it does indicate that you've got a lot of electromagnetic activity going on in these areas, and I think a lot of parasites feed on that. I think that the flap area phenomena themselves, the processes, feed upon that as well. So I think that's very relevant. Also, as Shane pointed out, that case in western Rhode Island where you had a large lake. You find underground rivers, and Shane can talk more about that too.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, that we did. I've done a couple cases where I've gone to the house, and the activity that they're explaining to me is very much in line with every other case that I'm talking about cases that are regular or active on a regular basis, not just something happens once a month. I'm talking like multiple times a week. There's always a river, stream, or a water body nearby, and so there's been a couple, 3 times maybe, cases where I'm in a house that they're reporting all this to me, and I'm reading their body language. They're not lying, but I'm like, but something's off because there's no river or stream nearby your house. And every single time that's happened, they said, no, Shane, we've had our our land x-rayed. There's a river, underground river that runs underneath our house. So, I mean, these things really, so these flap areas, also the places where people are going missing, that are unexplainable, all are surrounded by rivers and streams. So whatever that process is that's allowing these crossovers, these portals, or whatever these things that are coming through, and interacting in some way, they're utilizing that mechanic. They're all doing it because in these areas you see aliens and UFOs and Bigfoots, and you have haunted homes, and at a very high level, and so it's definitely over. It
makes you feel like it's science that we don't understand yet, but science that might be explained in the future.
Exactly.
That is just, and so there is real explanation for it. It's just that we haven't gotten there yet.
What just dawned on me?
So it baffles us, and we tend. I mean, sometimes your first reaction is just to dismiss it because it doesn't fit into the category of how you see the world, and that's what a lot of our closed-minded scientists do. I argue with them a lot because they're just so tied to the scientific method they can't see beyond it, and actually hinders their thought process. But this stuff is real; it's going on, and maybe someday it'll make more sense.
Yeah, Ben, you got a point?
Yeah, it only just dawned on me now. With the increase in change in technology, especially wireless technology, it made me think of this conversation my wife had with her nutritionist, and her nutritionist was saying, you got to watch out for electromagnetic fields, you got to watch out for gamma rays, anything that's wireless, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of that, it can negatively affect your health. And a part of me thinks, well, that's kind of dumb. We don't have any evidence of that. But then it also brings me to a point that I realized earlier, is that this stuff hasn't been long enough. It hasn't been around long enough for us to test the side effects of it, right? A perfect example of that is electronic cigarettes. It came across, maybe a decade ago as an alternative to smoking cigarettes. And it was touted as, it's a healthier way to get nicotine so that, you can quit smoking and there's no harmful side effects. I mean, they had no evidence to say that, right? 5-6 years later, they're like, just kidding. It creates air bubbles in your lungs and could actually kill you, with the same amount of with the same percentage as, someone who smokes regular cigarettes. And, with that in mind, not to say that it's analogous, but the point I'm trying to make is we have all of these, wireless devices and all of these things that, we sort of assume have no effects on us, which is just, naive for all of us. We're seeing more and more paranormal activity, and we're hearing more and more about it. It could have more to do specifically, especially in flap areas and whatnot, but we're finding that even areas that are outside of this, that, maybe there are underground streams, maybe there are, more sandy soils and more things to conduct, electromagnetic activity. But I think the devices that we use too don't help. And I think that, with sort of coming to this conclusion of, I think maybe a lot of these other things that we have going on, whether it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything in that realm, that may or may not feed into phenomena of sorts, right? And it's sort of creating electromagnetic fields where there weren't really any before, or naturally occurring ones. So maybe our sort of method is changing along with technology as well, keeping that in mind.
Okay, Phil, I hate to keep you on the line here, but we have a question that is relevant to, I guess, all of us who are investigating that case. This is from Lauren in Connecticut, and this came in by email. First of all, she says, glad you're back, Ben. Okay, glad you're back, Ben, she says. Have you noticed any Mandela effects around the farm in Goshen? Have you noticed the Mandela events around any other investigations or flap areas you've investigated? And the Mandela effect is, just what we're talking about. People remember different outcomes from events.
Like the
Phil,
Berenstain Bears versus the Bernstein Bears.
Right. Phil, do you have any thoughts on that? Oh, maybe he thought I was saying goodbye. Oh, okay.
Wow.
All right. Well, Phil, you're a steely-eyed missile man. Don't disappear. And thank you for all your good work over there. Okay. We have. I'll leave this to Shane and Ben. Have you encountered any Mandela effect reports from that vicinity in the course of our work?
You've heard Shane.
I have not, no.
Okay. Strictly the Mandela referring to Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa and apartheid hero. He was, there were people who were having a conversation remembering, he died in prison, and he didn't. He ended up getting out of prison, he died in his 90s of natural causes. He was president of South Africa, and people had different memories of different events, different spellings of, as Ben said, the Berenstain Bears. All right. There, supposedly even books have been found with different spellings and all sorts of things of this kind. And we've done, I don't know if we've ever done a show on that. I've been on shows that have discussed this at length, but that's what the Mandela effect is. It certainly fits right in with the multiverse idea that there are different outcomes that overlap and overwash and things of this kind.
I think my favorite one was it Shaquille O'Neal or Sinbad who was in Shazam?
Right. Yep.
It's always like really common things that might happen. And people have different memories of, we confabulate and things of this kind. So I think there is something. I remember Richard Dolan, a well-known UFO expert, on a panel all of us were on too at a UFO conference, was saying he sort of. Matter of fact, I think he was on this show. We were doing a panel broadcast, and he said, "No, I don't believe in the Mandela effect. I think it's not what people think it is, and this sort of thing." Other people disagreed, so it's still the jury is still out on that.
I mean, most of it's kind of like a pop culture thing, right? But I guess on a small scale, I guess a Mandela effect would be, I put my keys on the table. I know my keys were on the table, and then you go and look, and they're not there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably, if we're talking about small scale stuff, I doubt that, the mayor of the town suddenly disappears, dies in jail, or or whatever, something like that. I don't think there's any large scale Mandela effects that would happen in any flap area, right? I think a lot of it could be, sort of a weird cultural consciousness thing where some people think one thing and other people think another, and then, sort of get an idea planted in their heads. But it's entirely possible, too, that, there could be shifts in reality. Some people remember, from different worlds, different outcomes, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's very difficult to put your finger on. And it's common among, this is the double-sided question that often occurs to me in things like this. You've got people who have, false memories or just don't remember correctly. And other people who remember other things. Is it just false memories and confabulation, or is it real memories of real worlds where things were different? Because we, if these theories are correct, we're living in a number of different worlds all the time, and our subconscious here is our conscious there, and it's actually rather elegant, I think. Other people think it's crazy, but
I mean that's true. But then you kind of have to figure out what memory actually is. And, can we trust memory, right? If we discuss an event that you and I were part of, we might say the same things, but it's entirely possible that we'll remember things differently. And it's because we see it from our perspective. And, the problem with memory is perspective and how we view the event.
Well, the question is, that's true. And the question is, too, what is memory?
Right.
It has never really been pinned down in the brain. And, of course, people like Dr. Carl Jung, the great student of Freud, who eventually came to the conclusion Freud was full of baloney, came up with the idea of the collective unconscious, that our memories and a lot of even our personalities and a lot of things that we think are inside us are not. They're shared in what's known in physics as a non-local manner. That's outside of us and involves all of us, and even maybe even something greater, the whole consciousness of the universe or the multiverse. So that's it's really difficult to pin down. But as Phil was indicating, and as we've often been saying lately, today's paranormal is tomorrow's science. And undiscovered science, as our friend Mark D'Antoni would say. Shane, any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, everything that you guys said, great. But yeah, the Mandela effect, I'm aware of it. I just never actually physically, well, actually, that's not true. Because I remember Sinbad being a purple genie, even though he never was, I guess. I'm beside myself because I can remember it, in the whole Berenstain Bear thing.
You're listening to Behind the Paranormal, and it appears that our connection with all three guests has frozen up. Please stand by.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to the Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Again, it appears we've lost all three of our hosts on the Behind the Paranormal program. Please stand by. We're trying to reconnect with our hosts. Please stand by. And it appears we're going to fail to connect to our hosts, and it's very near the ending time for our program. We apologize. But then again, even on Behind the Paranormal, paranormal things happen. Have a pleasant day. Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Hi, everybody. This is Dave Richards. The 2020 Milk Fund auction is underway, but due to Rhode Island's COVID-19 restrictions, pick up and pay is in the parking lot of the radio station. Saturdays only from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. or by special appointment. If you can't pick up and pay on Saturdays, call the fabulous Denise at 770